Mistakes? You know you've made a few. Well, in today's video, we're going to look at some of mine. They say you're supposed to learn from your mistakes. We're going to look at some mistakes that I made about 14 years ago with the painting behind me. The title is Drac Called. Yes, it was during my vampire phase. I don't know. Maybe you had one. True Blood was playing. I think Twilight was coming out. It happens. But I digress. So, learn from your mistakes. We're going to critique the painting, and after that we're going to pop it in Photoshop, and then we're going to go over the critiqued items that we determined in the critique, and we'll go ahead and correct them in Photoshop and see what a difference it would make if I had maybe painted this painting today. So, learn from your mistakes. Let's see how that goes.
Welcome to my channel, Shelley J. Cox. Come along with me on my art journey.
So one of the things that I learned from critiquing and going back and looking at this painting is today I would have staged a photo shoot. I would have set up my model, simulated the lighting that I wanted to portray in the painting, and then I would have had that as a reference, and I wouldn't have been guessing at how the light effects were going to happen on the figure in this painting. And that's pretty much what was going on. And you know, there's artists that can really pull that off. Certain lighting situations are more common and you can kind of understand and know how to paint that lighting situation. But in a more complicated lighting situation, well, at least for me anyway, I need to take that photo reference. I need to have that as a guide. Now I don't have to stick to it directly, but at least I have it as a guide, and if I want to deviate from it, I understand where and why I'm doing that. But having the photo reference to go by initially is really helpful, and if I was doing that painting again today, I would definitely start with a photo shoot.
Okay, this is the painting that we're going to be critiquing. It's called Drac Called, and he called on a flip phone. I think that might have been called a chocolate. And so here she is, our vampire girl. Painted this a long time ago, so we're going to look at each mistake that I made, and we're going to pop it in Photoshop and see how we can fix them up. And then we'll compare it to the original and see if fixing it really did make a difference. I have a feeling it will. So the first area of the painting that I find a little off is this area where her dress tucks between her legs. I think it would be more realistic if it had come out a little bit onto this thigh and under to here probably. So in Photoshop we're going to add some material here and pull that down so it looks a little more realistic. And I think too, the areas for these buckles, they're a little too flat. There needs to be some more shadows around them. So if we take a look at the whole painting, it appears that the image is just floating. There's no shadows below her dress to ground her to the floor. And even the way that the fabric from her dress is falling below her legs, it would be more spread out laterally, and it just looks like it's falling straight down this way, and that also gives her the appearance that she's floating. And she is a vampire, so it may make sense that she was floating, but it was not my intention to make her look like she's floating. All right, let's take a closer look at her face. The first thing I notice is the harsh lines. I mean, there's even a black line I can see. I don't know if you guys can see it on the video, but it's pretty harsh. Her mouth shouldn't be painted so harshly. Even the eyes, I mean, look at every individual eyelash painted in. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. Maybe I was then, but now it just looks very cartoonish and amateurish. It shouldn't be painted that way. And the nose, also too harsh, and these are way too dark, the nostrils. I'm not even sure in this position that you'd see her nostrils. It'd be very slight. And with this light coming from below, I think there would be more shadow, especially her forehead, that would be darker. But I think I'd like to see some more shadow here and get a little more transitional shadows so her cheeks look rounder. And even here would be a little bit dark compared to the glow of the under part of her nose. So that's something that we can fix. We'll look at that when we put her in Photoshop. Also, take a look at her hair. It's way too stiff. There's too many descriptive lines. I would have liked to have seen a way more painterly, brushy approach to doing the hair. And the way that this piece is just hanging straight down, it's really stiff. It's kind of doing the same thing as the fabric. It should have been out and flowing this way so it was laying onto the floor more. I feel like, I don't know, it just seems like it's kind of floating out in space to me a little bit. Maybe if I had made it shorter for composition's sake, it could have just flowed into the arm a little bit. That might have been good. But if we wanted to keep it separate, then I think it should flow over here and hit the ground. I'm not sure I'm loving the mustard yellow highlights either. I think the coloring of her hair could be handled a little bit better. I know I'm trying to catch the glow of the candlelight that's coming down from below, but I don't know, that's kind of too mustardy. I'd rather see some more natural highlights. Okay, the other problem I see with this painting is all of the edges are very harshly painted. Everything's too defined. You shouldn't be able to distinguish between every single item. Every part of her is described in line. I mean, with all of the shadow opportunities that this painting could have, I mean, truly, things should just fall off into shadow and get lost, not be so perfectly described. So that's another thing we're gonna do. We're gonna play with kind of pulling shadows in and losing some of our edges. You want to have a lot of lost and found edges. You want to have a variety of edges. All these edges are found. Look at this leopard coat. I mean, it is so flat. There's really no shadows. There's not even any definition of, I mean, you could have shadowed it so that maybe you could see there's a sleeve or part of the coat. I don't know, it just cracks me up how flat it is. And even this chair, there's not any shadows, there's no fall off, it's just totally flat. Now some painters do good, their whole paintings are flat and painted that way and they pull it off, but this is not making me feel that this was handled like a master painter that's very skilled in oil painting. So take a look at her legs. The color is way too saturated. In fact, I bet you if we drop this in Photoshop and we change it to a black and white image, you're going to see there's not a lot of change in the values. I think if we increase the amount of value change, that you'll get more of a feeling that there's really a round, muscular calf and thigh. And the colors are way too saturated. I think I had in my mind that, yeah, she's surrounded by candlelight. But the candles that are in front of her face are way over here by her head, and they're pretty small, so I don't think the light would travel quite that far. And also the candles behind her are kind of being blocked by this thick bat wing, which wouldn't let light through at all, so there'd be a good amount of shadow. And I think we could definitely increase the drop-off further down, and I believe that would improve the look overall of the composition. So we'll check that out in Photoshop. Okay, take a look at the bracelet on her arm. That looks so cartoon. There's really no shadows, no good tonal changes where it should roll away from the viewer and get a little bit darker and transition and round over into the back of her arm. And there's no shadow below her arm, so everything just looks really flat and way oversaturated. I just can't wait to get a hold of this painting in Photoshop and take away some of this saturated color. So the other thing that's cracking me up here is if you look at the two candles in front of her, their perspective seems strange. it's like the back of the candle is completely missing. Like I feel like we're looking down on her, so we should be able to see the back part of a little bit of the top of the candle. I just feel like this should all be coming a little bit more towards the viewer. And even the phone looks a little off, so I think the perspective with those elements in the painting could be tweaked. Some painters play with the perspective on things like that on purpose, but I was not that clever back then.
All right, let's put this baby in Photoshop, make the corrections, and see if we can't make a better painting by learning from our mistakes. Let's do it.
Okay, let's do a little correction here. I've got Corel Painter 12 pulled up, and we're gonna make the first correction with the dress coming forward a little bit here in this leg area. To start, I'm just gonna be using a airbrush type effect. I think it's gonna tuck right in there. That seems to look a little more natural. While we're on the dress, let's just see if we can't soften up some of these highlights. Now her dress is made out of like a satin material, so there would be some strong highlights, but not quite this strong. Those harsh highlights occur more on like a leather or plastic type fabric or material. I think they'd be that bright because you have the wing blocking a lot of the light source, especially right here on the hip. Those highlights wouldn't be quite so bright. Nor would they be here on the thigh. So we're just darken those up a scotch. So there'd be a lot of shadow in this area. I feel like we would kind of lose the dress into the floor. They'd kind of get lost with one another. Now here, I think what we're gonna do is grab some of this floor color and paint over the edges of the dress so that we just kind of stop her from floating. Looking for a finished situation here. We're just trying to see if we were painting this painting, if these corrections would be the answer. Pooling over here, and then her leg's gonna come out on top of it. A little bit of a shadow around her. Put that in. Now this is the closest part of her body that is near the light source, so this one won't be too severe. And I'm going to go ahead and put in the shadow, and we're going to come back over with some flesh in that arm area so it won't look so stiff here. Some shadow over here. I'm going to see if we can't be dropping a lot of this off. That is so harsh. Just the whole thing. The whole thing. And then this material, it could be here, but it needs to be more laying, pooling on the ground. So let's put in some more tile floor. I like to see it just flowing in the same direction as her leg. A little more value. We'll go back over the red flesh here in a sec with some actual flesh tones. We just want to sort of vignette this whole situation. What's happening? Oh, that chair looks way better now. Darken the highlights on that dress right here. Scotch. Okay. That's doing something. And we're going to get a oil paint brush. Let's do real oil soft wet. See how we like that. So I'm just going to sample like right there. And that feels like painting. Still too saturated for my flavor, so let's do a little desaturation mode. Get out of that triangle color and move into the grays. See how we can lose some of that perfect outlining situation, which I don't want. Grabbing too much of the black in her dress. Yeah, there we go. So that's what you want to do. You want to mess up those perfect edges. Gotta kill them. I haven't painted in the computer in a while. I have to get used to it again. It's a little bit of its own mind of its own. So the color that I have on the paintbrush is mixing with the color that is already down. Might be able to work with that. Just make the color I've got on my brush really very gray. I'm so much better with a real paintbrush and paint. Ooh. I guess if I did this more often, I'd be better at it. And I hope you can see how darkening things up and pulling it off into the shadow is improved upon the composition, killing that saturation. You can hide some of that color. Just let a little bit of that foot peek out of the shadow. Having all this color here is almost like having an underpainting. I'll control the airbrush tool a little bit better. There we go. It's a little messy, but you get the idea how that should just kind of drop off on that side into some shadow. Now we darken up this leg a little bit, it will help balance the composition a little better. Start off with that oil painting brush again, just to make our edges messy. So these mid-tone values should be definitely grayish neutral. And then as we move into this highlight, it can be cool a little bit, but it is closer to the candle, so I don't want it too cool. I think that keeping a little touch of that yellow in there is fine. This is a great place to have two edges that just kind of merge value-wise. They could be different colors, but the value, if it's the same, we'll let them just kind of blend. It adds an area of interest. You don't have to define every single part. You can let some parts be left to the imagination. I'll work on this for a few minutes and then I'll be back. Okay, let's work on her face a little bit. See if we can't soften some of these lines up. Get some of this saturated color out of here. Go right over top of those lips. Once we take care of this face, we'll go in here and get some of the hair fixed up. So the light's coming from below. We want to, this is a little exaggerated, let's lighten it up. We want to have some shadow here because the eye's going to indent in slightly. And the shadow is going to come across the nose and into the eye again, just under the eye. And the whites of her eye are way too white, so let's put some shadow on those. There'd be a little indentation here away from the light. That's all lit up. Be a little bit of a shadow underneath the lower lip. So with the eyebrows, there's going to be a dark shadowy area on top, but then you're going to catch some light on the lower part of the eyebrow. Yeah, like that. Maybe a little more saturated. It's still dark, but it could be saturated there. Okay. A little bit there. Just gonna have a little bit of makeup here on the lower eye rim. So we can put that in. I don't want to put it in too dark. Let's just get rid of some of these eyelashes. We want the face to be the focal point, but we don't want it to be too severe. It's looking a little more vampire-esque. You can have a little bit there. And let's just soften up those nostrils. They're in the light. We don't want them to be so dark, and we don't want them to be so gray. There's always a lot of warmth in the nose. A little back in. I'm liking those nostrils disappearing a bit more. Not so harsh. So the upper lip would be lighter because it's catching the light. So it's kind of a pink, a warm pink. We're just gonna put it in loose. No harsh lines. Now that bottom lip is going to indent in away from the light a little bit right there in the corner. And right here where the two lips meet. There we go. Mess up that bottom line a little bit. I like to put more pink than I think I need and then go back and carve it out with the flesh tone. Just going to be pretty light in value and tinging towards that yellow-orange color because of the candlelight. So just carve that out. Give her that nice Renaissance shaped mouth. See how much prettier she is now? No one looks good in harsh makeup. Not even a vampirist. So I want to just put a little bit of a glow on her chin. Not too wide. Let's see. This should be the brightest part on her face. There we go. light from underneath is never really very flattering, but it does give you a great sort of eerie look, which is perfect for a vampiress. Scotch too dark. What I want to do is put a little bit of a shadow in the eye. It would turn in away from the light here. The light would hit more underneath the lash. Actually, the reverse of how you would paint eyes usually. Sometimes I like to exaggerate things so I can see it and then bring it back a little bit. Yeah. I don't like seeing the iris perfectly outlined like we got going on here either. Soften those lines up where it'd be brighter and lighter. Yeah. I'm just gonna pull some of that blue out into the white of the eye. That's a neat effect, I like that. Okay. And I feel like this pupil is a little bit too perfect as well. Let's just tone down that highlight. I'm going to keep it located closer to that upper lash line. There we go. Okay. I've got almost a black color, so we'll put in a little bit of this eyelash. I just want to suggest it. You don't have to paint every eyelash like I had. Just suggest it. A little lip definition in the center there. Not with black like I had originally. A little red-ish. There we go. I think you get the gist of it there. So if we pull out, see the whole thing, definitely losing some of the saturation and liking the color scheme much better. Now I'm going to go in and see if I can't fix up her hair for a moment. And I'll check back in with you in a sec. Okay, getting a little bit further along with the hair now. Taking out those mustard yellow highlights. Gonna have kind of an auburn color hair. Still has a nice warm glow from the candles. I feel like it's a more natural color. Not that a vampire's needs to be natural. And then the other thing, we're just taking out some of these brush strokes. There's too many pronounced brush strokes. Of course, this looks better when you're using a real paintbrush. I'm just doing sort of an airbrushy effect. But it'll get the job done, and we'll be able to see what we needed to see. So we fix the hair over here. It's not hanging in midair any longer. You don't need to paint every single hair on the head. That's not the kind of look I care for anyway. I thought about breaking that line into the bust area, but no, let's just keep it. It'll blend in, kind of get a lost edge into the flesh there. There we go. Got some firm edges, some lost edges. She's looking lit from underneath. I like it. Alright. Let's do something with these hands and this bracelet. Some fingers here. You noticed originally the position a little strangely, especially this guy. He should come around like that. And then this finger would go up here. And this one can come this way. And once we draw it out, we can pull it in better. Alright, so what I don't like about that finger is it's rotating inward in a very strange manner. So let's just redraw it to be down there. Let's see, just see a shadow out in between here for now. Light. There we go. Going at it like a sculptor. Should be a little straighter, just a little to the left. There we go. Grab some of this nail polish color. Vampire red. Pop that in. Sculpt out the rest of it here. And we'll do it. So, the bracelet is supposed to be somewhat of a gold color. I like to put in the mid-tone for gold and then come back in with the highlights, typically. Yeah, so that's going to be pretty much our mid-value areas. So I'm going to go in now with some darker tones to help give our bracelet a little more realistic values and definition. It already looks better. When I'm painting gold, I don't mind a few accents of a bright yellow, but gold is not yellow. And up here, we lost our clasp. There we go. And our hand here, a little shadow help. I don't mind where it drops off, kind of blending into the purse. Zoom back out, see what we've got left here. It's quite a lot of change. So I'm just grounding the candles here. I don't think I'm going to get into redrawing them. We get the gist. I mean, it's already better with putting the shadows in so they don't look like they're just floating. But I'm doing the shadow on the phone so that it is kind of floating. Just deepening some of the values through this candles. They were pretty much the same. Alright, I think that at least kind of gives us an idea. So when I pull it up and put it directly next to the original, we could see where these changes will have made quite a difference if we were painting it all over again. Okay, here you can see the image pulled up in Photoshop, black and white. So this was the original painting, and when you look at the values in the original painting, they're pretty flat, as we had mentioned before. So let's go ahead and look at the revised painting in black and white. And that looks way more interesting. There's a lot more lost and found edges, variations in the value scale. That coat looks like it has some depth to it. That chair looks like it's further back in the picture frame. Yeah, I think the leg definitely has more shape and feeling of round flesh, thigh and calf. There it is in the original, and there's the new one. Way better value setup than that. Very flat. Okay, here's the original on the left and the revised painting on the right. You be the judge. You tell me in the comments, which one do you like better? I know which one I like better. They are two very different paintings, but that is 14 years of knowledge put into the revised painting. Now, that was done with Corel Painter, mind you, a digital reworking, if you will. I'm sure if I were to actually paint this again, or even to paint over the original one with actual oil paints and paintbrushes, I could do a much better job. I'm not a computer graphic artist. I definitely prefer things more old school. But there you have it. The original versus the revised.